Today, we're diving into the almost unbelievable story of Violet Jessop, a woman who earned the nickname Miss Unsinkable by staring down three of the most famous maritime disasters in history and living to tell the tale.
3. Just let that number sink in. That's how many catastrophic incidents Violet Jessop survived. And not just on any ships, but aboard the world's most famous and ill-fated family of ocean liners, the Olympic-class sister ships. So the big question is, how did one woman manage to survive all of them? Was it just some kind of incredible, unbelievable luck? Or was there something more to it? Well, we're going to explore how her survival wasn't really about chance at all, but about a lifetime of resilience that was forged in hardship. Let's start at the very beginning. To really understand the woman who would survive the Titanic, we have to go way back, long before she ever set foot on a ship. Her story actually begins on the rugged agricultural frontier of Argentina, where, just surviving was a daily lesson. Her resilience was baked in from an early age. Born to Irish immigrants in Argentina, she was one of only 6 out of 9 children to even survive to adulthood. She personally beat a tuberculosis diagnosis that doctors swore would kill her within months. And then, after her father died, the family's stability just vanished, forcing them to England and pushing a young Violet toward a career at sea. Her entire childhood was a constant battle for survival. And life at sea wasn't some kind of escape. Imagine the contrast. She's serving in these floating palaces of unimaginable luxury, while her reality was grueling 17-hour workdays. It was a life of constant physical exhaustion, and she was in this really precarious position as a woman in a totally male-dominated world. In fact, just getting the job was a hurdle. Back in the Edwardian era, shipping lines actually preferred older, kind of frumpy stewardesses. They were afraid that attractive young women would be a distraction. Jessop was told flat out that she was too young and too pretty, and she literally had to wear dowdy clothes and no makeup just to get hired. Okay, so by 1911, all that hard work paid off. She landed a position on one of the most prestigious ships in the entire world. Her career began aboard the RMS Olympic, where she would very soon face her first major test at sea. Jessop's fate, as it turns out, would be tied to these 3 legendary sister ships. First, you have the Olympic, the largest civilian liner of its time. Then, the Titanic, the absolute pinnacle of unsinkable luxury. And finally, the Britannic, which was later refitted as a massive hospital ship during World War I. And Violet Jessop, she would serve on every single one of them. So, on just its 5th voyage, the Olympic collides with a British warship, the HMS Hawke. And the cause was just astonishing. The sheer size of the Olympic created this powerful suction that literally pulled the smaller ship right into its side. It tore a huge gash and flooded 2 watertight compartments, but the ship managed to limp back to port. The incident was serious, but it kind of created this false sense of security, reinforcing the myth that these ships were truly indestructible. Of course, that belief would be completely shattered less than a year later. Jessop was transferred to the brand new RMS Titanic, and her experience during that disaster would be defined by one deeply personal and pretty mysterious moment. When the Titanic hit the iceberg, Jessop's job became way more than just physical. She was ordered up on deck to be a living example of calm, especially for the non-English-speaking passengers who couldn't understand the commands. Her very presence was supposed to prevent panic. What a tremendous psychological burden to bear in a crisis like that. As she was being ordered into Lifeboat 16, a ship's officer shouted those exact words at her and just thrust a bundled baby into her arms. For 8 hours, she clutched this child in the freezing cold, a tiny life depending entirely on her. And this is where the story gets really strange. Once they were rescued by the Carpathia, a woman rushed up, grabbed the baby from her arms, and just ran off without a single word. The child's identity was a complete mystery for decades until one day Jessop gets this mysterious phone call. A woman asks if she saved a baby on the Titanic. When Violet says yes, the caller just laughs and says, "I was that baby," and then hangs up forever. So, what do you think? Was it a cruel prank or a genuine, if bizarre, thank you from across the decades? We'll never know for sure. Her biographer, he thought it was probably just a local prankster, but Violet Jessop herself, she always believed it was real. You'd think that would be enough for one lifetime, right? But fate was not done with her. During World War I, she served as a Red Cross nurse on the 3rd sister ship, the HMHS Britannic. And this 3rd disaster, It would be the fastest, the most violent, and the one that brought her the closest to death. To really understand the sheer chaos of it, just look at the sinking times. The Titanic took about 2 hours and 40 minutes to go down. The Britannic, its supposedly safer, upgraded sister, sank in just 55 minutes. The evacuation was just a desperate, desperate race against time. The ship struck a German mine. It sank so fast because a bunch of portholes had been left open to air out the hospital wards, which completely compromised the watertight compartments. And because the ship was still moving, lifeboats were launched directly into the path of the massive churning propellers. Jessop watched in horror as people were, in her own words, chopped to bits. Seeing her own lifeboat heading for the same fate, she jumped. She was sucked underwater, her head violently striking the ship's keel and fracturing her skull. But somehow, she surfaced and was pulled into another boat. And in a moment that just shows her incredible composure, one of her very first thoughts was relief that she remembered to grab her toothbrush, a very practical lesson she learned from that freezing, uncomfortable night after the Titanic sank. 3 disasters, 3 survivals. It's an amazing story, but to focus only on those events is to miss the much bigger picture of a truly remarkable life and career. Her real legacy, you see, is the voice she gave to the forgotten workers of the golden age of ocean liners. The disasters, as dramatic as they were really just a few years in a staggering 42-year career at sea. She went right back to work on the Olympic after the war, served on world cruises, and didn't retire until 1950. The sea wasn't just a place where she survived, it was her entire life. She worked in what they called the victualling department. This was the crew responsible for everything that made the passenger experience so luxurious. The food, the cleaning, the service. They were the engine of comfort, but their stories were almost always invisible. And that's exactly why her memoirs, published long after her death, are so incredibly important. They give us this rare, first-hand account from a working-class woman in this world. She details the brutal hours, the complex class dynamics, and the immense psychological strength it took not just to survive a disaster, but just to do the job every single day. And that brings us to the final really crucial takeaway. We call her Miss Unsinkable, and we focus on the ships. But maybe we have it backwards. Her incredible story isn't really about the spectacular failure of technology. It's about the quiet, unrelenting fortitude of a woman who time and time again simply refused to sink.